What does that mean for me as a racing driver? Am I ever going to drive again? We used Velcro. We Velcroed it to my steering wheel, so it was just another sensor to look at.
Right.
I love saying that everything is figure-outable.
Welcome to the Spark series, where we ignite conversations with innovators, entrepreneurs, and changemakers, creating real action. Our goal is to spark ideas, share journeys, and inspire action. My name is Jason Williams. In this episode, we'll explore resilience, innovation, performance, and what it means to turn challenge into competitive advantage. I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Charlie Kimball, professional IndyCar driver and the first licensed driver with type 1 diabetes to win a race in the series. Known for his ability to adapt, innovate, and perform at the highest level, Charlie brings a unique perspective on overcoming obstacles and driving toward breakthrough results. Charlie, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Tell us about, growing up. Did you always want to be a race car driver?
Well, I grew up watching racing. My dad is a mechanical engineer as well as coming from a farming background. And so I grew up watching motorsports. In fact, I used to watch the races on Sunday mornings to see if I could see my dad at the racetrack. And then I got into go-karts. Got into cars at the age of 16 when I got my driver's license, and from there, I never looked back. I'd fallen in love with racing, and all through high school, I was working towards either racing or going to university for engineering, because if I couldn't drive cars for a living, I wanted to design them and work on them like my dad had. Fortunately, the driving worked out.
What does that look like? How do you go from go-kart in southern rural California to obviously the biggest stages in the sport?
And a lot of it came down to learning as a 17-year-old how to build a 3, 5, 10-year business plan. Because while racing is a sport and it was a passion, it's still an industry and still a business. And what I learned very quickly as I progressed through was to win on the racetrack, I had to first win in the boardroom. I had to go get sponsors. I had to build corporate partner programs. I had to leverage my future success against the ability to have the chance to succeed now, right? I got investors in. I created programs, led by my dad and led by my mom and led by advisors, but I was the product. And so when you're marketing and selling and creating yourself as a brand and a product, it's really interesting because you don't have to figure out how to take ownership of it because it is you and you already own you. You wake up with the product, you go to sleep with the product, you think about the product all the time. And you also think about who you want to be when you're selling yourself or selling the opportunity to work with you.
So obviously, we have this career that progressed. I know you had some early success as a driver, really starting to kind of rise the ranks. But then walk us through this moment in 2007.
So I walked into a doctor's office because I had a skin rash on my arm. And he gave me some cream to clear it up and asked if there was anything else going on in my health I wanted to talk about. In just 5 days, I had lost 25 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, that was almost 15% of my body weight. And the doctor looked at me and he said, okay, I want to do some more tests, but I think you have type 1 diabetes. I said, great. What's that? Didn't know what it was. And in fact, I said, well, if you fill the prescription, I thought it was an antibiotic, I've got to go to a race. He said, well, it's a little more intense than that. You're going to have to check your blood sugar, manage your blood glucose, take insulin for the rest of your life. Okay, what does that mean for me as a racing driver? Am I ever going to drive again? And he looked up and he said, I don't see any reason why not. When I asked if I was ever going to drive again, there are incredible people doing amazing things with diabetes. You may have to change how you go about it, but it shouldn't get in the way of you living your dream as a racing driver. I remember it was shortly, maybe a day or two after I was diagnosed and on insulin, and I was learning all about it, and I was trying to push the doctors and the team to teach me as much as they could as quickly as possible, because racing driver, I don't like to move slowly. I wanted to really accelerate into that knowledge and that growth of managing my diabetes, and I don't know what I don't know. And so that really inspired me to figure it out because I had something that was worth it. Getting back in a race car was worth anything. Anything I had to do to get back in a race car was going to be worth it. And so I had to learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could, and figure it out. There's a reason I drove a race car, is because I was good at it and I loved it. And that passion, it was the fuel for the innovation to success.
Walk through this path of, okay, I'm now Charlie, type 1 diabetic. I'm racing in a car. I've got to monitor myself during the race. You can't just pause a race and
Right.
during a pit stop, hey guys, let's take an extra minute to make sure I'm okay, right?
Right.
Like obviously
When you're going a football field a second, you
Right.
take 3 extra seconds, 5 extra seconds to take an insulin injection.
Right.
You're 5 football fields behind where you were.
Right.
And what we realized was that preparation and planning was going to be our biggest strength. I trusted my doctors, my team, myself, preparing my body so that when I was in the car, all I had to focus on was driving. And yes, I checked my blood sugar, just like I checked lap time,
Right.
just like I checked oil pressure. It was another sensor that I added into the inputs going through my brain that weren't changing what I was doing, but was along for the ride.
Eventually, right, this health data is integrated into the car. I mean, again, fast forward, to really the performance side of excelling, in this new condition. But it didn't start there, right? You've built this framework about what innovation looks like based on your personal experience. So kind of maybe just a good opportunity to introduce your driven framework and then what that actually looked like and take shape from, glucose monitors to integrated, health system.
With some time and distance, I was able to notice, or I really looked at what process I did and why I was so confident getting in the car that I'd be safe and competitive. I distilled it down to these 6 pillars, the 6 steps, checkpoints, as you would, if you would, the driven mindset, to drive to a goal, to research infinitely, innovate and invent, validate the inventions, elevate and expand, and then get to the next level. And when you work through this roadmap, what you realize is that when you go from your goal to the next level, it becomes this massive innovation. And looking back, it's like I tore down barriers and I created solutions seemingly out of thin air. But every step along the way was not overwhelming. The goal was easy for me. I had a passion. I was going from go-karts to the Indy 500, and diabetes was going to be a roadblock unless I figured out how to turn it into just a speed bump. The great thing about this roadmap is it's not just a toll road, right? You don't get on at the beginning and get off at the end. You can loop back, and I found myself running through this process, looping and nesting and looping and nesting and looping and nesting and getting through each checkpoint. Because then that invention started with, okay, my endocrinologist who has worked with incredible athletes, won Olympic medals, and helped marathoners and ultramarathoners and long distance cyclists compete and succeed, she said I'd be an ideal candidate for a continuous glucose monitor. Well, okay. Before we ever figured out how to put it in the data system and then use that data to come up with an ideal blood glucose with a regression analysis, we used Velcro. We Velcroed it to my steering wheel, so it was just another sensor to look at.
Right.
We kept it super simple. And then when we realized that I crashed and the Velcro broke, we needed some more. And so we zip tied it on. We kept it simple. But then when we had the time and we had the space to think about it, we said, wouldn't it be nice if it was part of the electronic system? So not just my eyes and my thoughts looking at it. We had the engineers, the team, the timing stand. They were diving into it. They could keep track of it. And then once it was in that system, what could we do with that data? How could we track it? How could we learn from it? How could we be better and elevate my performance to the next level as a driver with diabetes, but more importantly, as a competitor? The thing I really love in this process is, yes, the invention, right? The innovation that, well, what if we do this? Does that work? You know, I love the phrase figure outable. Everything's figure outable. Sometimes you try something new, and when you go to validate it, sometimes you hit a wall. In my case, it was figurative, or it was literal, not figurative. And sometimes it's figurative, and sometimes you realize that you throw it against the wall and it breaks. But you learn from how it breaks. Pretty soon, you look back and you've had a 10-year career with over 160 IndyCar starts. You hold a track record at Texas Motor Speedway. You've won a 24-hour race at Daytona. First driver to start the Indy 500 with diabetes. You finished 3rd and 5th, 40% of your Indy 500 starts, you finished in the top 10, and you're an IndyCar race winner. As I look towards the next steps in my careers and my life, taking what I've learned there and building guardrails and guidelines for future athletes with diabetes in motorsports, right? Build that knowledge base to help make everybody better.
And I think this, this mindset so often with young entrepreneurs is, well, I can't do that, or I don't have the funding for this. And like, here's a multi-million-dollar IndyCar operation. This, $200,000, $300,000 PlayStation remote control that is the steering wheel.
Right.
Let's just stick some Velcro on here and see what happens, right? Hey, I got extra ties in my toolbox.
Right.
And like, it doesn't take much to again, your process, right? These loops. Let's test it out. Let's validate. Let's iterate. Let's try it again. And in your you looped forward throughout the process, right?
And a lot of times in startups, they talk about like moving fast and breaking stuff, and I hate that. Like that doesn't feel right to me. I think about, thinking fast and moving slow. The SEALs have a sentiment that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And when you think about that in racing, slow hands, fast lap times. But it's fast thoughts, slow hands, fast lap times. Because when you're thinking a long ways ahead and you're moving intentionally and slowly through that lap, that's where speed comes from. And when you talk about innovation and invention and iterations and progress, you think quickly, but you move intentionally. When it goes wrong, you take the time and create the space, not only to give yourself permission to fail, but you give yourself the opportunity to learn from failures. A mistake is only a mistake if you don't learn from it.
If there was one thing you want a student to walk away hearing your story, what is that one thing you hope that these, young students or even young professional drivers, right, walk away, knowing about Charlie Kimball's story?
Well, because I'm me, I'm going to say there are two things. The first thing is everything's figure outable. And as you figure it out, enjoy the journey. Take the moments to celebrate the wins, take the moments to celebrate the losses, as long as you learn from them. But that journey towards figuring it out is something you will always look back on and enjoy and smile about.
Okay, perfect. And then just before we cut the cameras, I know I shared several questions at a time. We kind of covered some as you were going, so I didn't technically go through all of them. Just any other thoughts? Was there anything in your mind you said, hey, I wanted to share this and we didn't talk about this?
No, I think we covered so much because it is, we have talked about how to approach challenges and I truly believe that anything you think is a roadblock can turn either into a speed bump or a detour, right? Sometimes you climb over it or sometimes it puts you on the path you're supposed to be on. I truly believe that.
Okay. Shameless plug. You're out talking. You're still out in the race industry. How do we find out more about Charlie Kimball's, your career?
So you can keep up to speed with me, if you'll pardon the pun, on Instagram and Twitter. I guess it's X now at Charlie Kimball. Also charliekimball.com. If people want to book me for a keynote or a workshop or find out where I'm going to be in the world, charliekimball.com. People can reach out to me directly. Also through those social media channels. I don't post as much. I enjoy being in the moment. And I truly believe and love the lesson we heard from Olivia, to be valuable and not viral. And so I try and be valuable on social media, not just viral.
Yeah, great. Well, great stuff, Charlie. Thanks again.
Thank
you. Appreciate you taking the time.